Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
The following is a class on Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, given by His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakya Chakshur-militan-yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamlan Shri Gurun Vaishnavanascha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tham Sajevam Sadvetam Savadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Nitamscha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare So ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome all of you to this lecture series. We had a lecture series, so we have detail. So we will start with the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is called Contents of the Gita Summarized. Now the Bhagavad Gita, as you know, has 18 chapters. In the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, there is a description of the armies on both sides. And you can say that the real philosophy starts from the second chapter. So the second chapter is called Contents of the Gita Summarized. In the first chapter we have seen that Krishna is inducing Arjuna to fight. Actually the subject matters of the second chapter can be divided into 5 broad groupings. One is Arjuna surrenders to Krishna and Krishna prepares to instruct Arjuna. The second is the emphasis on the soul, where Krishna is telling Arjuna, fight, don't worry, because the soul doesn't die. The third is, Krishna is saying, fight without any attachment and without any reaction. And then Krishna explains how to become fixed in Krishna consciousness. So the Bhagavad Gita second chapter starts with Arjuna lamenting. Arjuna was full of compassion. We can see that Arjuna was not an ordinary character. A devotee of the Lord is by nature very, very compassionate. Here in the present environment, even if somebody owes us 10 rupees, we are ready to fight with him, kill him for a few thousand rupees. But here we see that Arjuna was entitled to a whole kingdom. He is renouncing his whole kingdom. He is not willing to fight, even though he is entitled to that kingdom. So, Krishna is addressed as Madhusudana. So Madhusudana means, Krishna is known as Madhusudana because he killed the demon Madhu. So similarly, we all have doubts. We all have doubts as to what we should do. What is my duty? Should I do this? Should I do that? And these doubts can be removed if we turn to the proper authority for guidance. Now, on the one hand, Arjuna's compassion may be termed very religious, but if we deeply analyze the philosophy that we will see as we go along, we can see that Arjuna's compassion was somewhat misplaced, because compassion should be properly applied. Compassion should not be misplaced. After all, Arjuna was being instructed to engage this battle for the right cause. Every attempt was made that this battle may be avoided. But it is only when even Krishna's efforts as a messenger had failed, as a last resort, this battle had to be fought. So compassion should be rightfully placed. But Arjuna's compassion is being wrongly placed. Arjuna was compassionate due to his bodily attachment. And the whole process of spiritual life is to get out of this bodily attachment. Therefore, the ABC of spiritual life is to understand the difference between the body and the soul. Once we understand the difference between the body and the soul, and we act in that understanding, then we can actually make spiritual advancement. So Krishna was surprised. How have these impurities come upon Arjuna? After all, Arjuna was a member of the Kshatriya order. The Kshatriya's duty is to protect. Actually, the word Kshatriya is divided into two parts. One is Shat, which means hurt, and the other is Trayate, which means to give protection. So, as a Kshatriya, his duty was to give protection. So, Krishna was surprised that how have these impurities come upon you? They do not indicate that Arjuna, he's a man of learning. In other words, Arjuna was a very intelligent man. To be an eternal companion of the Lord is not a small achievement. So Krishna is pointing out to Arjuna that how have these impurities come upon you? They are not befitting to a man of knowledge. So Krishna is inducing Arjuna, do not give in to this impotence. Do not give up your duty, which is to engage in this battle. Again and again, Krishna is actually instructing Arjuna to engage in this battle. Now in this second chapter we see that for the first time, Krishna is addressed, the Bhagavad Gita states, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. In the first chapter, Krishna doesn't say anything. But in the second chapter, it is said Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. That means the Supreme Lord speaks. So here we get a very important message. And the message is that there is a difference between the position of the Supreme Lord and the ordinary living entity. If, for example, Krishna and Arjuna are to be considered on the same level, then what is the special significance of this philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita? The Bhagavad Gita loses its significance if it is spoken by somebody who is equal in status to Arjuna. So, at the commencement of this chapter, it is established that Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. So today, of course, the word Bhagavan, as you and I know, has become very cheap, isn't it? Somebody can do a little bit of magic and he's accepted as Bhagavan. But Bhagavan actually, according to Parsamuni, the father of Vyasadeva, is one who is in possession of 6 opulences to an unlimited degree. Aishwarasya samagrasya viryasha yashashashriya jnana viragyava shaiva sanna bhaga itingina. That individual can be considered to be Bhagavan, who is in possession of the following 6 opulence. He must be the richest. He must be the strongest. He must be the most famous, the most beautiful, the most knowledgeable, and the most renounced. Now you may have a Mr. World who may be the most handsome, but it's not necessary that that person who is handsome is also the richest. And you may have somebody who is the richest man, but that doesn't necessarily follow that he's also the most knowledgeable, isn't it? So the Vedas explain that the word Bhagavan can be applied only to an individual who is in possession of all 6 opulences to an unlimited degree, all at the same time. So one reason why Arjuna is hesitating and engaging in this battle is because on the other side, they are very great soldiers who were like his teachers, like Bhisma and Drona, who are worthy of his worship. In today's society, the teachers don't care for the students and the students don't care for the teachers. But that is not as it existed thousands of years ago. The teachers were held in great reverence. So Arjuna was saying, Krishna, you're telling me to fight, but how can I fight? When on the other side, you have people like Bhisma and Drona on the other side. And Arjuna is saying that it's going to be better for me if I lived in this world just by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of those who are to be considered to be like my teachers. So in other words, Arjuna is not being attracted to the opportunity to claim his kingdom. No, he is not attracted to the worldly gain. So Arjuna presenting Krishna with a series of arguments as to why he should not engage in this battle when on the other side there are all these great soldiers for whom he's had great respect. So Arjuna is bewildered. And frankly, you and I both get bewildered at times, isn't it? Arjuna is bewildered, he doesn't know what to do. Should he conquer them or should he be conquered by them? If he engages in the battle, there are only two outcomes. Either he's going to win or he's going to lose. If the sons of Dhritarashtra were to die, then he would not care to live because after all they were his cousins. So Arjuna surrenders to the Supreme Lord. Samudha Chetaha. Samudha Chetaha means I'm confused in my heart. Arjuna gets completely confused about his duty. And he says, now I'm confused about my duty and I've lost all composure because of my miserly weakness. In this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. I'll read to you the purport to this verse by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I'm also going to read to you in the middle some selected purports by Srila Prabhupada. In nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. In every step there is perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. All Vedic literatures advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities of life which happen without our desire. They are like a forest fire that sometimes blazes without being set by anyone. Similarly, the world situation is such that perplexities of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. So basically, that is a reality. Forest fire. A forest fire starts without anybody desiring it, isn't it? You don't have to start a forest fire. The trees collide, the forest fire starts. So basically, there is nothing but anxiety and turmoil in material existence. And unfortunately, even in the presence of this perplexity and turmoil, we tend to believe that we are in a very comfortable position. And hence, we don't want to search for the remedy. Like Prahlad Maharaj, the great sage, has said, Nade vidum swarta gatim hi vishnum duras e bhai arthamanina. Prahlad Maharaj says, the problem of society is that they do not know how happiness can be found. And they just try to convert a position of distress to a position of comfort. So Prahlad Maharaj is lamenting at the attempts of the society to convert a position of distress to a position of comfort. So the point is that there is perplexity. And the Vedic wisdom advises us that in order to solve the perplexities of life, one must approach a perfect personality who has no other interest but self-realization for guidance. So Arjuna is completely confused, and Arjuna is claiming that there is no way he can drive away his grief. So Arjuna was very sad. Parantapaha. Parantapa means chastiser of enemy. So Arjuna has approached whom? The chastiser of enemy, Krishna. In other words, he has gone to the proper authority for guidance. So when the Supreme Lord saw that finally Arjuna has surrendered to him for guidance, he was very, very happy. Because Arjuna has at least recognized his inability to decide what to do. And so Arjuna has approached the proper authority. So Krishna says Those who are wise, they lament neither for the living nor the dead. For example, in the society we live, it is very normal for us to cry when somebody dies, isn't it? When one of our relatives is smiling, even if he's a drunkard, a womanizer, a meat eater, we are smiling, we are happy. But the moment he leaves the body, we all tend to cry. Even if we don't want to cry, it's a custom, you must cry. Okay, but what's the point in crying when the soul has left the body? Actually, we should cry when the person is still alive and is misusing the body. That is the time to cry. There is no point in crying after the soul has left the body. Your crying is not going to achieve anything. Just like it's another custom is to decorate the dead body. When the man dies, they decorate the body. Like in the Western countries, funeral homes are one of the biggest businesses. When the person dies, they dress him up. They do so much of makeup that they can't even recognize the person after they do the makeup. So they do so much of makeup because they want to bury the body with the impression that the person died smiling. So what Krishna is saying, that those who are wise, they do not lament. Our lamentation is due to our identification with the body. Our lamentation is due to what is known as skin disease. In Sanskrit it is known as kripana, a miserly man. Just like a miserly man is one who may have money but he doesn't know how to use the money, isn't it? He likes to see the money just stay in the bank. That's a miserly man. So similarly, the Vedas explain that one who has this human body actually is a very wealthy man. But if that wealthy man does not use his body to get free from the cycle of birth and death, such a person is considered to be a miserly man. So the Vedas conclude that one who does not utilize the human life for the purpose of self-realization is actually a kripana or miserly man. So Krishna starts off by presenting the philosophy of the soul by first pointing out that both he, Arjuna, and Krishna are eternal. Krishna is pointing out, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. In other words, it is not that today I have taken my birth as Mr. Patel, so this is my first birth. No. The Gita clearly states that the living entity is eternal by nature. The Bible also makes the same statement. The Bible also, in supporting the statement of the Bhagavad Gita, states, what shall I do if thou gainest the whole world but suffer the loss of your eternal soul? So there is no denial of the fact that the soul is eternal. So Krishna is beginning this very important instruction on the soul by telling him, Arjuna, you are saying that if you engage in this battle, you're going to kill someone, but there was never a time when you did not exist and I did not exist. So there is still a difference between the living entity and the Lord. Because some of you may want to argue that since the Lord is eternal and we are also eternal, then what's the difference? We're all one. What's the difference? Why do you say there's someone superior to us? We're equal to Krishna. Because Krishna is eternal, we are also eternal. So this argument is refuted. This argument is refuted by a very simple logic. That is, you can have an ocean of water. Then you have the Arabian Sea. So you can also have one spoon of water and the ocean. The ocean and the one spoon of water, they taste identical, isn't it? Even if you take one spoon of water from the vast Arabian Sea, it is going to be salty. And the vast Arabian Sea is also salty. So what is the difference? The difference is that though they're both salty, one is minute or a small quantity, and the other is a vast quantity, isn't it? So similarly, the Vedas explain, Nityo nityanam chetana chetananam eko bhavanam vedati kama. That the living entity is eternal and the Supreme Lord is also eternal. Nitya. He is eternal and we are eternal. But the difference is that singular living entity who is eternal is maintaining all other eternals. Just because Arjuna is a friend of Krishna doesn't mean Arjuna can be exempted from doing his duty as a warrior. So, Krishna is saying again that in the past all the wise men acted with this understanding. The understanding that Krishna is the proprietor and the cause of all causes. So we must understand through the Vedic scriptures what is action, what is forbidden action, and what is inaction. This is very important. We had touched on this very briefly yesterday, but we didn't get into detail. So Krishna says the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. How often do you and I get bewildered and we don't know, oh, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? So the principles of religious duties are explained over here. Krishna says the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. What is action, what is forbidden action, and what is inaction? Karma, vikarma, akarma. Forbidden action is vikarma. Forbidden action means laws that are completely against the laws of God. Just like you have the laws of the state, but anything against the laws of the state is what is considered to be anti-state, isn't it? So similarly, you have forbidden action. Forbidden action is vikarma. Vikarma means what is forbidden action. And karma. Karma is actually action. And akarma. Akarma is also inaction, but it is not inaction in the sense that a devotee doesn't work. For example, even our household devotees who do jobs like you or businesses like you but who are chanting Hare Krishna, it is not that they don't believe in doing any action. There is action, but that action is still considered inaction. Just like, for example, we have this microphone manufactured by the Philips company. And here is another microphone manufactured by the Sony company. And here is a tape recorder made by the Sanyo company. And I'm sure this video is also made by Sony or one of these Japanese giants. Now, certainly, all this facility was not produced by them with the mind that it's going to be used in service to Krishna, isn't it? They manufactured all this thinking that they're going to make a profit out of this. But now, we are using this Philips microphone in broadcasting our lecture to all of you. So it is not that a devotee of the Lord doesn't perform any action. You understand? It is not that a devotee of the Lord is inactive. It's not a devotee who considers that his duty is to just withdraw to the mountains is not actually a devotee. A devotee of the Lord is very active. One of the qualifications of one who takes shelter of the Lord is that he's anxious to be linked up with the Lord for 24 hours a day. So a devotee of the Lord is very active, but his activities are for the pleasure of the Lord. So there is inaction, there is action, and there is, what was the third thing? Forbidden action. So we must know what each of these represent or what each of these are. So forbidden action we've already explained. Very broadly we can say like meat, fish and eggs, intoxication, illicit sex life, gambling, all these things which are against the laws of God are forbidden action. Then what is action? Action is when you perform karma yoga. When you're performing activities, you may approach the demigods, you want something in exchange, but at least you're following the scriptural injunctions to some degree. And akarma, that is inaction. That is when you perform activities for the pleasure of the Lord. So while you're performing activities for the pleasure of the Lord, there's absolutely no reaction. Therefore, Krishna says, one who sees inaction in action. Seeing inaction in action means no reaction to the action done for the pleasure of Krishna. When you do an action for the pleasure of Krishna, there's no reaction. For example, the same Philips microphone, I'm sure, is also probably being used in gaylords where there's some ballroom dancing going on. The same lights can also be used in a nightclub. But here we are using it for the pleasure of the Lord. There's this hall, for example. This hall has been used for so many business conferences. Nobody could even dream that we would use this hall in the Chamber of Commerce for a spiritual conference, isn't it? It's the most unusual place to have a spiritual conference in the Chamber of Commerce Hall. But we are having it in the Chamber of Commerce Hall. So, when action is performed or for the pleasure of the Lord, that is called inaction. So, inaction in action means when one is working for the pleasure of the Lord. And action in inaction. This refers to the impersonalist, for example. Krishna has in the 4th chapter established his personal form. And in establishing his personal form, Krishna has established the superiority of the personal form of worship over the impersonal form. But there are those who take to the impersonal path, and they make some sacrifices. But whatever sacrifices they may make, that is not enough because their sacrifices are not permanent. They're not permanent because the impersonal path can never really give you bliss. Satchidananda. We had just described the 3 characteristics of the Lord, one of which was bliss. So therefore, one doesn't get full result from that. So action and inaction, thou one may be doing, but actually that action doesn't free one completely from the cycle of birth and death. So Krishna is saying what it is difficult to understand what is action, what is forbidden action, what is inaction. Therefore, Krishna is explaining that a devotee goes on the transcendental path, on the path of transcendental happiness. His every endeavor is devoid of the desire for sense enjoyment. His every endeavor, he may be walking, talking, he may be running the country, just like we heard earlier in our discussion today how Krishna gave this knowledge to Vivaswan, to Manu, to Ikshvaku, who were all rulers. They were all ruling, but their every activity was devoid of sense enjoyment. Now, I'm not going to talk about sense enjoyment now because we've already talked the previous days. Sense enjoyment again means activities for the pleasure of the senses and defiance of the laws of God. So, he's considered to be a sage of perfect understanding who has burned up the desire for sense enjoyment with the fire of perfect knowledge. Just like when you have fire. When you have fire, you can burn out everything, isn't it? When you have fire, you can burn all the dirt. So similarly, in the fire of perfect spiritual knowledge, you can burn the desire for sense enjoyment. The desire for sense enjoyment appears attractive because we don't have the fire of knowledge. Just like if a child is told, here is a bottle of poison, drink this bottle of poison, and in the end I'll give you Cadbury's chocolate. The child will fall for it, isn't it? Because the child is not mature enough to understand what poison can do. But if somebody told you, for example, drink this bottle and I'll give you a crore or a piece, you won't do it. Because you'll say this poison is going to kill myself. So similarly, the tendency to engage in sense enjoyment, this tendency to engage in sense enjoyment can be burnt by the fire of knowledge. Therefore, it is very important that we cultivate this knowledge. And a person who has cultivated this knowledge is always satisfied. He has no desire for fruitive action, even though he is engaged in all different types of work. He engages in all different types of work. He uses his mind and intelligence to control his senses, and giving up the false sense of proprietorship, he becomes free from false possessions and sinful activities. Now, Krishna is explaining the position of one who is spiritual. He is satisfied with the gains which come on their own accord. And he is equipoised in all situations. If you remember, this point was also made. If you remember, this point was also made in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. In the 2nd chapter, we have already crossed over this verse Matra sparshiti konti sitosna sukha dukhada agama paina nityastam tatikshasho bharata. Where Krishna is telling Arjuna how one must become equipoised, you follow. So the same point Krishna is again making, that one who is satisfied with the gains which come on their own accord, and who is free from the duality, he can actually understand me. So Krishna has described that one who is on the spiritual path, he understands this transcendental knowledge completely. Now, Krishna also says that there are different types of sacrifice that one can engage in. Just like you have good, better, best. Best is higher than good, good is higher than better, and so on. So there are many different types of sacrifices that one can execute. Of course, the goal of all these sacrifices must be to understand the Supreme Lord. You understand? That must be the goal. The goal must be to understand the Supreme Lord. The goal must be to free oneself from the cycle of birth and death. That should not be compromised, and that cannot be overlooked. So Krishna says that there are some yogis who worship the demigods. Of course, they worship the demigods for material gain. And there are also some who take to the impersonal process. That is, they want to merge into the effulgence of the Lord. And they are the brahmacharis. Just like I said, there are different social and spiritual orders. The brahmacharis, they control the hearing process and the mind. The brahmachari must control the mind, because without controlling the mind, he cannot have success in life. This is also a point that we've already discussed. And even those who are in the household or ashram, grihasthas like all of you are, they must also regulate their senses. In other words, just because somebody is in the household or ashram does not mean that he does not have to regulate the senses. Just because one is in the household situation does not mean that he has a license for doing anything that he wants without any guidelines or restrictions. So Krishna has made the point that there are different types of sacrifices. Somebody may worship the demigods. Then somebody may want to work on the impersonal process of self-realization. Then you may have the brahmacharis who will control the mind and the hearing process. Hear the names of the Lord. Then you have the householders, they will regulate their senses. Thou living with a wife, children, and so on, they believe that the senses must be regulated. And so by having these different sacrifices, one can gradually make advancement. For example, there is Drava Yajna. There are some who sacrifice their possessions. They give money in charity, for example. The rich people like sacrificing their possessions. They'll give money in charity to a sadhu. There are some who like performing austerities. You may not be able to give in sacrifices because you don't have that you may not be able to give your possessions, but you may be willing to perform austerities. Then there are different forms of yoga, the Eightfold Yoga system. And there are some who just read the Vedas, like you have the Pandits, they just read the Vedas to try and obtain knowledge. So there are different types of sacrifices that one can perform. Then you have the pranayama. That is, you control the breathing process. Of course, even the controlling of the breathing process is not so that you get a healthy body for sense pleasure, but ultimately it is to make spiritual advancement. So Krishna is saying that there are different types of sacrifice that one can perform in order to become cleansed of sinful activities. But all these sacrifices must culminate in or must lead to knowledge. And this knowledge must ultimately result in renunciation. You understand? If the purpose of sacrifice is not the development of knowledge, if the purpose of sacrifice is not the ultimate development of renunciation, then these sacrifices are useless. Just like, for example, in the Western countries, people are so health conscious that they go jogging They'll go jogging at 6 o'clock in the morning. They won't come to the temple, but they'll go jogging. But they'll go jogging because they're very health conscious. They know that without good health you can't have sense enjoyment. Or people may perform austerities. But if the goal of austerity is not the development of transcendental knowledge, which leads to the development of renunciation, then it is just useless. So Krishna says, Nayam lokasa agya gyasa kutanya kuru satama. Arjuna, nobody can live without sacrifice happily. So you cannot live happily without sacrifice, either in this life or the next life. In other words, thou, we abstain from sacrifice. Thou, we are scared of sacrifice. Thou, we are scared of following the principles of religion. Actually, Krishna has very boldly stated that without sacrifice, the living entity can never be happy. And Krishna also says that all these different types of sacrifice are mentioned in the Vedas. Therefore, we must develop the mood of sacrifice according to the Vedas, and then one will be able to acquire this transcendental knowledge. So, there are different sacrifices depending upon the mood of the performer. If the mood is to develop transcendental knowledge, it's just like there's a saying, you get what you pay for, isn't it? Every businessman knows that phrase. You get what you pay for. When somebody comes to buy something, you tell him there's a high price, good commodity, isn't it? So, the different types of sacrifice, you can sacrifice the breathing process, pranayam, you can do the eightfold yoga system, you can cultivate knowledge, you can give your possessions away, you can practice austerities, you can practice mind control, you can practice regulated sense enjoyment. There are all these different types of sacrifices which are mentioned in the 4th chapter, but we must understand that all these different sacrifices are for that one goal, development of transcendental knowledge. Now, this transcendental knowledge can only be developed, as Krishna says in the 4th chapter, verse 34, Tad vidhi pranipatena paripashena sevaya bhagdekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshana. This is a very milestone verse of the Bhagavad Gita, a very important verse. Krishna says that if you want to understand the truth, you must approach a self-realized spiritual master. You must approach a bona fide spiritual master if you want to understand the truth. And if you approach a bona fide spiritual master in the disciplic succession, then you will be able to understand the truth. So, in every sphere of life, we need a teacher, isn't it? You want to learn driving, you go to a driving school. You want your children to learn how to write alphabets, you send them to a school. You want to learn how to be a telephone operator, you go to a teacher. So similarly, even for developing spiritual knowledge, you must go to a spiritual teacher. You must go to a spiritual teacher who understands that nothing exists independent of Krishna, who understands that all living entities are parts and parcels of Krishna. Just like in our body, you have different parts, hand, legs, ears, and so on. But these are all parts of your body. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Matra sparshati kaunteya sitoshna sukha. He says, Aham bija pradapita. I am the seed-giving father of all living entities. So, the qualification of a bona fide spiritual master is that he recognizes the entire creation to be a part and parcel of the Lord. Not like, for example, I can be the head of a religious faith, and I say, animals don't have a soul, but human beings have a soul. So friends, you can eat the animals. No, that the self-realized soul must understand that all living entities are part and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and nothing can exist independent of Krishna. So when you understand that nothing can exist independent of Krishna, and the qualities of a saintly personality are described, I think I responded to those qualities in an answer to a question that some of you had asked. Titikshva karunikaha surda sarva dahina majata shatrava santa sadhva sadhu bhushana. This is explained by Lord Kapila Dev, that a perfect sadhu, he must be tolerant, He must be merciful. He must be friendly to everyone. He must do everything based on the scriptures. So Krishna says, even if you are the greatest of sinners, but actually, when you are on this path of transcendental path, you'll be able to cross over the ocean of misery. So actually this material world is like a vast ocean. And in this vast ocean there are many sharks. Just like if you go to the Arabian Sea, you'll find many sharks and snakes and so many entities, isn't it? So if you would try to swim with your hands, you'll get caught by these different animals. So actually this material ocean is a very difficult ocean to cross over. It's not easy. Therefore, Krishna says you must take shelter of a bona fide guru in order to understand this spiritual knowledge. So just like a blazing fire turns wood to ashes, isn't it? You may have the best teak wood, but if you light matchstick to it, the teak wood will be burnt to ashes. Am I right? So just like a blazing fire turns wood to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all the reactions of material activities. So the fire of knowledge burns to ashes all the reactions to material activities. So just like this blazing fire turns wood to ashes, with the fire of knowledge you can destroy this. Therefore Krishna says that there is nothing so sublime as transcendental as the spiritual knowledge. And one who understands this knowledge, he is happy within himself. It is not that one who is on the spiritual path, he must be a crorepati and he must have a Mercedes car or a new Maruti car in order to be happy. He is happy within because he is on the right path. He is happy within because he is on the spiritual path. And such a person is able to achieve peace. But what is the position of those? What's the position of those who don't have faith in the scriptures? What is the position of those who don't have faith in the scriptures and who don't live by the scriptures? Krishna says, for the doubting soul, there's no happiness. Krishna says, for the doubting soul, there is no happiness. Now or later. You understand? Like there's so many people who say, oh, I don't believe in the Vedas. The Vedas don't have any relevance today. Who knows that Krishna spoke the Vedas? How do you know there was a soul? Those who undermine the authority of the Vedas. Krishna says, for the doubting soul, there is no happiness. Therefore, Krishna is inducing Arjuna to take another weapon. What is that weapon? Knowledge is the weapon of knowledge. So Krishna says, Arjuna, take this weapon of knowledge, and armed with this weapon of knowledge, stand up and fight. So similarly, as I stated earlier, Krishna is establishing through the Bhagavad Gita how each one of us should mold our lives. You understand? Krishna is explaining how each one of us should mold our lives so that we can live a normal life. We don't have to run to the forest. We don't have to go to the mountain. We can stay in the world, in the city of Bombay, in Churchgate, wherever your house may be. But you are staying without being affected by the material world. Just like there may be a lotus flower. The lotus flower is in water, but the water doesn't touch it, isn't it? Our spiritual master used to give another example. You have the mouth of the cat. Now the mouth of the cat carries the kitten, the baby cat. But the baby kitten, when it is being carried by the kitten feels completely sheltered, isn't it? Completely sheltered. But when the rat sees the cat's mouth, what does it say? Mar gaya. Mar gaya, finished now. So similarly, if you are armed with spiritual knowledge, then you are like the kitten in the mouth of the cat. And if you're armed with ignorance, then you're like the rat that faces the cat. So don't be a rat that faces the cat and gets swallowed by the cat. So don't get swallowed by this material energy. Rather, use the material energy to serve the Lord. And this is the statement that Krishna makes. So, believe it or not, we've covered the 4th chapter, 42 verses of the Bhagavad Gita in this 4th chapter. So, So in this fourth chapter, we have summarized the following points. We have first of all indicated the history of the Bhagavad Gita. Am I right? You remember that? Is the history of the Bhagavad Gita. Then, when Arjuna asked Krishna, how am I to believe that you gave this knowledge to the son god Vivaswan? Krishna explained his transcendental position. After explaining his transcendental position, Krishna has explained the system of varnashram that is created by him. After establishing the system of varnashram, Krishna again explains how one must give up fruitive work, and he goes on to explain the different types of sacrifices. And ultimately Krishna tells Arjuna, arm yourself with the spiritual knowledge so that you can destroy ignorance. So similarly, each of us has to equip ourselves with the spiritual knowledge. And just like every morning when you get up, you want the paper, Times of India or Free Press or whatever. But every morning when you get up and get ready, you should also read the Bhagavad Gita. But when you read the Gita, just don't read it as in passing. Read it with, like you study for your exams. Then you will know what Krishna is saying. And when you know what Krishna is saying, and when you have the assistance of a bona fide guru, this is another point that Krishna makes in the fourth chapter, that you must have a bona fide guru, then you can understand the spiritual knowledge. And this spiritual knowledge then will enable you to destroy the ignorance that is bewildering you. Also in this fourth chapter, Krishna has explained action, inaction, and prohibited action. So if we obtain our answers, like Arjuna is obtaining from Krishna, then we will have no problems in life. Hare Krishna.